we need to talk about parenting advice. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name is Dr. Kristen Summer. I have a PhD in loosely child development, depending on how deep and complicated you want to get, but I've been teaching developmental psychology for years, and I've been researching early cognitive development for a very long time. I live mostly on the social medias because YouTube takes far more of my time than I have. I am a full-time researcher at a university here in Australia. I'm a mum to a nearly 3-year-old, which is shocking to me. I am an autistic woman who was diagnosed late in life, like recently. I'm almost 29 now. And yeah, these are the things that I've observed while being a influencer on Parent Talk, Mom Talk, and just really in the social media space at all, as someone who has a background in evidence-based parenting, who understands the brain and the development of children enough to be able to teach it at a university level, and as a mother myself and the experiences I had while raising my child, and while being a brand new mum with a baby that didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't do much of anything that was easy and cried a lot, as well as being what we later figured out was neurodivergent and having postnatal depression and anxiety. Fun stuff. Anyways, it's been a long 3 years. Let's talk about the problem with parenting advice. So you probably hear the age-old adages. Don't hold that baby, you'll spoil them. Your child's trying to manipulate you. They've got you wrapped around your little finger, their little finger, whatever. Or don't feed to sleep. It'll create a bad habit. That's a negative sleep association. You can't do this, you can't do that, so on and so forth. Here's the thing in parenting. There is no absolutes. You cannot tell someone not to do something in parenting because every parent is different. Now, child abuse should be a hard no. And choosing a child seat, like a child seat, shouldn't be a choice either. But for things when it comes to feeding to sleep, when you breastfeed to sleep, when you give your child a bottle to go to sleep, they're not hard no's. They're things that are leftover adages from the Industrial Revolution and from a time when we knew a lot less about children's brains. When the world thought of children the same way they unfortunately still think of animals, which is to train them, and that they don't have a brain and don't have emotions and feelings and it won't affect them when they grow up. We know a lot more about children now. We know a lot more about their brains. We know a lot more about the physiological functions of breastfeeding and so on and so forth. But a lot of social media and a lot of that old school parenting advice hasn't caught up. It kind of just has been passed on from generation to generation as this is how you have to raise a child, rather than saying you should raise a child this way, when it's not actually the fact that you should raise them that way either. You can choose how you want to raise a child. And honestly, it varies a lot based on what culture you're from, where you live, what country, where your parents came from, and what your own internal desires and wants are for parenthood. So here's the honest advice from an evidence-based parenting kind of background and from someone who, as an autistic person, observes the world and sits outside of it. That's literally what I do. I observe and formulate questions and figure out how things work because it doesn't come naturally to me. So I try and research it, basically, hence why I'm a researcher. Here's what I've observed. Coffee time. Okay, when it comes to feeding to sleep, here's the thing. Breast milk has an amino acid called tryptophan, which I think converts into melatonin. Not like a biology person, so who knows. But what tryptophan does is it can contribute to sleepiness, and it varies throughout the day in maternal breast milk. So tryptophan gets released in breast milk and into the mother's body when they breastfeed. So it makes baby sleepier and it makes mum sleepier. So feeding to sleep has a biological function and it's probably evolutionarily adaptive. So, not breastfeeding to sleep means that you can't use that kind of superpower of being able to put a baby to sleep by giving them a safe drug. It's not really the right terminology, but whatever. Now, why has everyone always told people that you can't breastfeed to sleep? Why is it touted as bad and that it must stop? Well, breastfeeding to sleep means that you can't train your child to go to sleep independently, because what you're setting up for them is the expectation that you will be there to help them go back to sleep. Now, depending on who you are and your circumstances, you may need your child to independently sleep. This is not natural for children. Now, there are some temperaments that are a self-soothing temperament. These are your easygoing babies. They're your chill babies. But for a great majority of babies, they won't put themselves to sleep. It won't be easy, and it will be a lot of fighting, because human infants are evolved, designed to seek out security with an adult, someone who can keep them alive. So they want to be close to them. Now, if you absolutely cannot respond to a baby in the night because it doesn't work for your family, it makes you unwell, all these kinds of things, and your baby is waking far too frequently, well, first, probably go see a medical practitioner and ask them to run some tests to make sure there's not a medical reason for the extreme wakefulness. If it's just normal wakefulness, like babies that wake 3 or 4 times a night, even up to a year old can be quite normal. But that's not okay for you. You can go and do some kind of behavioral intervention. Start small and see if that works, and if it doesn't, you can scale up to the things like Cry It Out. But try to use a medically regulated practitioner and someone who isn't selling a sleep training package on the internet using predatory marketing. So in Australia, we have sleep training clinics attached to hospitals. Now, that stuff is still antiquated and not great, but if it's something that you need to be able to survive, then go for it. You need that. Your family needs you to be okay. Now, contrary to popular opinion, waking with your infant at night is not that sleep depriving. Okay, like hear me out, I promise. As a mother who woke with her baby sometimes 12 times a night, I get it. It is fucking exhausting, especially if you're trying to put the baby down over and over again in a cold cot in another room and things like that. That can be really exhausting because it takes a long time and then it wakes you up. And then you've got to like try and go back to sleep, and then all of a sudden the baby's back up. So you're basically not sleeping all night. This is very true. But when you change your perspective on your infant so that you're not as anxious about it, if you know that a baby that sleeps maybe 2 hours in a row isn't abnormal, it reduces the anxiety around it, and it makes mothers feel better and more well rested. We have research on this. For mothers that think that it's abnormal for babies not to be sleeping through the night by 6 or 12 months, they find that they feel the sleep deprivation worse, they're more anxious and all these kinds of things. And that's because worry and anxiety and stress, they cause a physiological toll. So on top of the sleep deprivation, you've got a physiological toll of worry. That's part of why on these platforms, I kind of try to explain what biologically normal infant sleep is. And that means that lots of infants don't sleep through the night at 12 months old. If your child's waking very frequently, there's probably something wrong in a medical domain. But it's almost never going to be because you created a negative sleep association. It's pretty normal for children to wake 3 to 4 times a night, especially if they know that they can rely on you to help them go back to sleep and they have a more challenging temperament. The babies that wake every sleep cycle are babies that have some kind of health issue. They're not the babies that are associating your comfort with them, generally. So, when it comes to feeding to sleep, it's not true that every sleep cycle, the baby is going to expect you to put them back to sleep. They're going to roll through some sleep cycles. Otherwise, they'd be up every 90 minutes once they turn 4 months old or whatever the sleep cycle length is at that point. That's just not true. We all know that our babies sometimes sleep through those sleep cycles. So if they do, then they're not associating that expectation that you'll continue to put them back to sleep. They don't wake themselves all the way up just so you can put them back to sleep. If they are waking all the way up in the middle of sleep cycles, they may need co-regulation to go back to sleep, and that is totally fine. But here's the thing. You don't have to do anything. You're not sleep depriving your child, and you're not going to cause them cognitive delays by responding to them in the night. You can be responsive and help strengthen that secure attachment if you like, or you can adjust it to work for what you want it to do. So if you don't want to bed share and feed your baby to sleep 3 or 4 times a night, then you don't have to. You can work with your baby to rock them to sleep, to pat them to sleep, to shush them to sleep. You can do a variety of things. Now, for some babies, this will work, and for others, it won't. It didn't matter how much I did any of one thing or how persistent I was or stubborn. My daughter was more stubborn, and my daughter required something that I kind of drove myself insane trying to avoid. And when I finally gave in to bed sharing with her and feeding her to sleep, it became the most important thing for my family. We did everything we could to make it as safe as possible. There's pros and cons. But when we kind of gave in to each other and found something that worked, it made everyone healthier and happier. It wasn't easy. It never is. And I'm still tired. But my daughter is now almost 3, no longer feeds to sleep. All she does is I read her a book and she flutters her eyes closed. And that's it. That's how she goes to sleep now. And do you want to know how I taught her that? I didn't. I didn't teach her that. One day, recently, my milk was just not there anymore, and she told me that. And I was like, well, maybe we should stop that. Maybe we should try something different. What do you think will work? We had one bumpy night where I held her while she got frustrated about trying to figure out new ways to go to sleep with me, but it worked. It's not this hard and fast rule. Babies are complex and adaptable humans. Just because you feed them to sleep at night or for their nap times when they're with you doesn't mean that they won't sleep in daycare. They'll just find a different way to do it. They'll have a little bit of time fussing and being frustrated about trying to find a new way to sleep with a new caregiver, but they'll do it, and they'll do it just fine. And they'll still be able to feed to sleep with you if that's what you want. The thing is here, you get to choose what you allow and what you don't. But your child will also kind of specify this as well, based on how easy or hard it is to transition to what you want. Sometimes it's impossible. With my child, it was impossible when she was smaller. So we ended up compromising in a way that worked for both of us. Mostly her, but now she sleeps on her own, in her own bed, all night long, goes to sleep with a book. She might wake up once a night, maybe a couple of nights a week, if that. But she sleeps perfectly through the night, most of the time, at not even 3 years old. And she started sleeping through the night around 2. So you get to choose what you want to do. And you need to know that children will change over time. People try to scare parents into saying, oh my God, if you're feeding your child to sleep now, you'll still be feeding them to sleep at 5. If you want to feed your 5-year-old to sleep, fucking go for it. That sounds like a wonderful activity for the 2 of you to reconnect after a really long day of work and school, if that's what you want to do. If you don't want to do that, if that makes your skin crawl, then you can make a change. Your child is not going to hit 20 and still be breastfeeding. So those fear-mongering tactics are ridiculous. And supporting your child in the night doesn't sleep deprive them. Withholding sleep training, oh my God, that's a really ironic term, doesn't mean that they're going to be cognitively delayed. You do not have to sleep train. There is no reason to sleep train unless you find it necessary. And what is necessary for you differs from what is necessary to someone else. I know the predatory marketing tells you otherwise, but it's not the case. What am I trying to tell you in this video? That's a really great question. All of the parenting advice that feels like it goes against your very instincts is left over from a time when we knew very little about a child's brain. And there's still lots of debates in scientific literature about things like sleep training. We know that holding babies and letting them be dependent on us is what leads to independent children in the future, creates a secure attachment. Maternal responsiveness and sensitivity is the biggest predictor of whether a child will be securely attached. And secure attachment is a really good predictor of how your child's going to develop socially, emotionally, and cognitively throughout their life. So when someone tries to scare you with a statement like, oh no, you can't do that, turn around and say, I can do what I like, and what I want to do is my choice, and that varies depending on how I'm feeling. I think that's what I want to say. I don't know. These are my random thoughts about parenting advice and how it's not in line with the current scientific evidence we have. And it's also not in line with how things should be done. Social norms are strong, and this is a social norm, unfortunately. Because in other countries, there are different social norms. Sleep training is considered abusive in some countries because it encourages people to leave their child alone while they cry. Bed sharing is the norm in a lot of cultures, and they find it crazy that people don't have their 11-year-olds in the same room as them. All of these things are social norms, and that's why you feel so much pressure to get your baby out of your room or out of your bed or off the breast before you're ready, because your society has this norm, this rule that isn't really a rule, it's just kind of an expectation that you're doing the wrong thing. But you're not, because every human is different. Every human has different things they need and want. And you can't underestimate the amount of anxiety associated with doing something against the grain. As a person with autism, I might feel this more acutely, the social anxiety and like the ability to go against the grain is something I feel really acutely. I find it very hard. Maybe that's why I'm a scientist and I focus on the evidence, because then that is going with the grain rather than against it. But normal people feel this too. I know this because I do research on this in small children. We are so adherent to social norms that it starts basically from birth. I've seen this in children as young as 2. They feel like they have to do something because that's the way everyone else does it. And that's evolutionary, right? We have to be a part of a group because that ensures our greatest chance of survival. So in order to be part of a group, we need to be like the group so that they accept us and protect us and all this kind of stuff. So it makes sense why we feel that pressure. But the best thing I can tell you is to find a new group, a group that shares your attitudes, opinions, and outlook. Not about things like child car seat safety. Please follow the laws when it comes to that. Try to follow the best evidence as well. That's usually important. We've done a lot of work on it for a reason, and take everything with a grain of salt. But find a new group that has a similar ideology around parenting as you do, because that'll reduce your mental anguish. It'll reduce your physical exhaustion that comes with mental anguish. It'll make you feel more competent and comfortable in how you are parenting your child. And it'll make you feel more positively towards your kid once you reevaluate them as not a failure or as weird, but as who they are in your family and how that works. Anyways, that's my random musings. I don't know why I'm doing this, but it's been playing on my mind for a few days, so whether anyone sees this at all, I don't know. It's rather long. What is it? Where are we up to? 20 minutes of me just rambling at you. Cool. My coffee must be cold by now. I better microwave it. Anyways, that's all I have for you. Go forth, parent how you see fit, follow the laws, Maybe listen to the evidence, but take it with a grain of salt, because not the evidence only looks at about only really talks about averages, like 70% of kids, so 30% are going to be different. And consume your social media with great skepticism, especially when it comes to people who are unqualified. Or people that are selling things, actually. Anyone who's selling something and trying to market something to you as like you have to do this, or is like, it feels fear-mongering and it makes you feel anxious, they're not the people you want to be around. Anyways, bye for now.